Hey everybody, Graham from Mowgli Adventures, and today we're going to talk about installation of our camper van electrical system. If you've been following along, you'll have seen that I've shown you a few of the major components that I'm going to be using, but now we get to install them. Installing your camper van electrics can be a bit of a daunting task. If you don't know what it is you're building, then you've got no chance of success. You will spend money, energy and time and not necessarily get the results that you want. The second thing you need to think about is, am I going to install it after I've got all the furniture put in or before? And then where does everything go? That's before you even put one major component in. I've used the interactive RV design tool, and in that process I had to work out the length of cables I was going to use for each of the components so I can get the right wire size. So in my head I've already had to design where things will logically and physically fit within that system. So I have an electrical circuit that tells me wire sizes and places, but now I need the build out. If you're at the first stage with an empty shell, my advice is to put the cabling in and the services in before you put all the paneling in. The downside for that means you need to understand where everything is going to go before you start your build. And it's a bit like a house that they lay the house cables in and you'll see walls with wires sticking out. You have to do the same if you're going to build your camper van electric system as you build your van out. And that means putting numbers on your cables and knowing what those cables are for in later life. So I use numbering, and I also put labels on sticky bits of tape on them, and I also drew on the wall that was this or that or whatever. So if you're in that scenario, great. And if you've got a workshop to lay it all out on the table, even better. If you are struggling in the back of your van to do an upgrade and you're leaving everything in your van overnight, etc., you have my sympathies, because it becomes a challenge. And if you're having to upgrade bits on the road, then that's even more challenging if you don't have the tools or the location or the bits easily to hand. But I'm going to talk about all the bits that we have and the bits that I need, and then as each program comes along, we'll come back and do each segment. What I don't want to do, and what I don't think is going to help you, is you seeing me with my head shoved in a cupboard saying, and now I fitted the battery, because that doesn't really work. You need to sit out on the bench, and then you need to be able to translate that into what is going to happen in your van or your RV. And I will try and describe each step. So please, if it's not helpful, comments below, tell me what I need to be doing to make it easier for you to see what we're doing. So let's have a look at what we've got so far. So there is my design. Fortunately, I can print this off and I can take this into the van with me. Our next key piece is a pen and paper and a ruler. And I just sat in the van and physically worked out where each piece will sit and how I will route the cables around the van and the switches and all the other pieces that I require. In my case, I'm moving quite a bit of the kit from its original location, so that will involve an awful lot of rewiring. Some of us spend an awful lot of time trying to do something before we read the manual. My advice is gather all the manuals, read them thoroughly before you start. Not only does it tell you how the thing operates, but quite often they'll give you some key installation pieces of information. The Camper Van Electrics Handbook also has a lot of information around installations and troubleshooting guides, so well worth the read as well. So now we're ready to go with our major components. As you can see, my batteries with the cable and the battery covers. I will follow that with the installation of the Renogy One. My next major component will be the inverter charger. I have the cable, I have the inverter charger, I have the remote switch, and some of the sensors that go with it. The next component that we've got to come in is the DC to DC charger. I've got my cables, I've got my Anderson connectors ready to go, and I've got my fuses. The final major installation will be the solar controller, cabling. I need to put a new roof gland in, and of course the final piece is the solar panels on the roof. So I've managed to lay everything out on the table, not unlike our wiring diagram. To the left here at the top I have the inverter charger. I have my engine charging going to the right there. Further down I have my MPPT controller. My batteries are in the middle. My M1 Energy One sensor is there. And if we move over closer, you can see that I have a buzz bar in place and a fuse block there. I've used this switch just to give an indication of where it will be. I already have some battery isolators in the van that I'll be using as my major points of control. So this is quite a lot of kit to install, and we haven't even started with the tools and all the fuses and all the connectors that we'll need. If you have the ability and the resources to be able to buy up front, that's great. And that just means you can have it laid out like I have, and you can just put it in step at a time. But life isn't like that, and I myself in the past have had to buy one bit and save up some money to get the next bit. And so in that type of scenario, you can do it. You just need to understand which is the right course of installation. So my build is simple, as I've said. I'm going to start with the battery. I'm then going to put the monitoring in so I can see the health of the battery. And then I'm going to put in the inverter charger, because then I can hook up and I can use AC in the van, so I can use my power tools. Then I'm going to put in the DC to DC battery charger so I can charge the battery from the alternator. And then finally, I'm going to upgrade my MTTP controller and my solar panels at the very, very last. I might use my existing solar setup during the interim period. And again, there's nothing wrong with me doing that as long as my controller can charge a lithium battery. So what are the other bits that we need to think about? So my inverter charger, I've got the right type of cable, which is 3-core and 2.5mm. I need connecting cables, generally coming with packaging, but you never know. My connectors here are Andersons for the DC to DC charger. Again, I've had to think about this before we get to this point. I've gone with a integrated fuse block. It's Blue C, and I'm using a Blue C buzz bar. Now these have limitations because they've only got 150 amps on the Blue C buzz bar, and I think I've only got 100 amps through my fuse block. So again, I've got the things that fit for my design. If you've got something bigger, then you have to get bigger pieces, and that's not always easy to think about before you actually install it. Other pieces that we need to think about. I've got some tools. I've got some wiring tools. Now I'm just going to take this off and show you now what we've actually got here. So a collection of screwdrivers, crosshead and flatheads. There's a multimeter, of course, a spirit level, because when I hang new kit up I want it to be nice and square. Steel rule to measure things, mainly the cable that I'm going to cut. Hacksaw, wire strippers, wire snippers. They are for preparing the larger cables. Sanding knife to strip back the plastic from the cables. Some screwdrivers and spanners, which may or may not help. And finally, a cordless soldering iron in the off chance that I might need that. And I've got some solder there as well. I'm not sure that I will need it, but you never know. And of course my tape measure to make sure when I cut the cables, I'm going to cut the right length. Measure twice, cut once. I've got to use a drill because of course things are going to be secured into the bulkhead or into the deck or into the framing. So we need a drill and possibly some drill bits. I've got some cable ties for some of the runs, and I've got a fuse just in case I need to clear off any of the holes or any of the filing fittings. Then we come into our crimps, and here is quite a lot. So I've got some blue spade crimps. I've got some big lugs for the big cables. It's sized for those cables. These need a hydraulic crimp to put them together. So I have the crimp here, crimp tool to do it. I've got an extra fan just in case I need to keep the batteries cool. And I've got more crimps to join wires together to fit into the fuse box, and a crimping tool. On top of that, I have heat shrink and I have cable numbers. So these are the bits that I've gathered, just that I know about, but I'm sure it's not everything that I will need to do this. So the pre-planning for the installation of that kit is quite involved. If you think about the journey so far, we've had to work out what we want in terms of our appliances, and then we've had to understand how we make the energy to run those appliances, and then we now have to sit in the van and put those in place so we can understand the distances between each appliance and work out the wire sizes and the fuse sizes, and making sure it all becomes accessible and easy to do. And you might be doing this in the middle of a build where you're trying to put in furnitures and fans and toilets and showers and water systems, etc. So take your time, take a step back and think about it before you start implementing each piece. If you need any more help, you can always get me on the Campervan Electrics Handbook Facebook group, or write to me at mowgliadventures.com. I hope this has helped you, and I look forward to seeing you in the next few programs. Bye-bye.